Hi, my name is Klaudia,
Hi, my name is Isabelle.
and for our final portfolio, we chose the third option, the visual film analysis. So for this, we wanted to pick a topic that we both found really interesting. And I mean, I love food, and
I
we're
also
also,
love
yeah, and we're also like pretty, I would say kind of like health conscious. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
yeah. So we decided to watch Food Incorporated, which just kind of, actually, I'm just going to leave that for the summary.
Okay, so for our film summary, we are analyzing Food Incorporated, like Claudia said. The documentary is about the problems within corporate America's monopoly-like food companies. The film goes into how the effects of large companies prioritizing profits has affected the lives of Americans and the dangers behind it all. Most food being sold at stores are owned by a handful of businesses that are not putting their consumers' well-being first. The film shares the truth about how our food is processed. According to foodprocessing.com, the top three largest food processors are PepsiCo, Nestle, and Tyson's, and they process the majority of the foods that we have in our grocery stores, which is a big problem because when you only have the power put to like three companies, then, you know, it's not the greatest thing. So, for key players and organizations, we see testimonials from farmers and consumers and families affected by the negligence of food safety. For example, there was one mom that was giving a testimonial about her really young son who died from eating, I think it was beef, because the food safety protocols were like not up to date and they just like didn't care about it. So it was like going through her journey of trying to figure out a lawsuit. And then we also look at the large food corporations. And according to PBS, these were Tyson's, Purdue, Smithfield, and Monsanto. So we chose this documentary because Claudia and I are both majoring in sciences, and we have a huge interest in food production and food safety. Um, we've both worked in the food industry before, and I don't know about you, but I've taken like food safety classes before getting a food job. And I thought it was interesting comparing what I learned in these classes with how the food companies like actually like interact with their food and how like they don't do everything that I was taught. And I was recommended this film by my parents. They watched this film a couple years back and they really enjoyed it, so much so where we don't eat any meat that comes from the grocery store anymore. We actually go to a farm that's like local to us that was actually in this documentary, which is pretty cool. So that influenced me a lot. And then I told Claudia about it and she thought that was really cool too. And like Claudia said, we're both very health conscious and we enjoy learning about ways that we can better our lives through the foods that we eat.
Yeah, I also just want to add on the previous slide, I feel like so many things that we just take for granted, like we have no idea where it comes from. Like you see all these foods like being sold at the stores, but most people don't even give a second thought to like what really went behind like the scenes to get that in the stores and really just like we just assume everything is safe because it's being sold to us, but this film just kind of like showed in a completely new light. Um, so the societal issues that were addressed were the main one, like the monopolies in the food industry. Like if you take away the option of choice, then the consumer, like they have to buy what's being sold to them. And I mean, we've seen this like in the industrial revolution, like these companies, like they'll have the power to start raising prices, doing literally anything they want because we have no option other than to continue buying from them. And then another societal issue is the harmful environmental effects that this mass farming has produced, like especially with like cattle farming. Like they will, in the film it was showing clips of like these cows that were living in their own manure, like it was like in up to almost their knees, like, and they were just living in these conditions, and it's like all of that like forms all this runoff and it's just really bad for the environment, along with like the mono agriculture where you just have one crop grown in like acres and acres of land, like it ruins like the diversity of the natural environment it's in. And then food safety and health issues, like I mentioned earlier, with the animals in their manure, like that is what we end up eating. Like we end up eating animals that have literally spent their whole life in their feces. And then it was just also showing, there was one clip in the movie where there was this farmer who like allowed us like inside her chicken coop, and she like ended up getting in trouble from the people she sold to afterwards. But it was just crazy the conditions these like animals were living in. She was walking through and then just picking up dead chickens off the floor, and it's just crazy. Like these animals are living right next to these dead animals. Like this is not safe. And because of these like harmful conditions, like these animals, like their meat gets tainted. Like there have been so many food recalls in recent years. Like Chipotle, for example, they're always having E. coli breakouts. And then what Izzy mentioned earlier, and I'm actually going to bring it up a little later, there was that one son who died of food poisoning, and they didn't even do a recall
It was
until
3 weeks
3
later.
weeks after they found out that the meat was poisonous for us, and they just like let it keep going. And another problem is that these mega corporations like McDonald's like is one of the largest like buyers of apples, of beef, of like cheese. And so that company like holds so much power in what these people produce. And it was talking about how we are just making foods now that are just so calorically dense. Like it's not about the quality, it's just about the quantity. And that's really bad too, especially for people who aren't really able to afford good quality food. They just end up eating so much fast food, and that leads to diabetes, obesity, and those in their own end up turning over like to more health risks like heart disease. Like heart disease is like the number one killer in
It
America.
is, yeah.
Like, and this is just like because people just don't have the option of doing anything else. So the consequences of fixing the societal problem, there's two different groups that are going to be affected. The consumer like would be positively affected because they'll have access to more choice, and when you have more choice, the consumer has more power, and that's what we want. We want the people who are buying the product to be in power, just to have like a healthy power balance. And they'll have lower risk of sickness due to the tainted food because we'll have these animals in better living conditions. And hopefully like the FDA will actually be conducting more checks on food safety, so that they'll make sure that like these plants are like up to code, and less health issues due to poor food quality, like mentioned earlier, like obesity, heart disease. And they won't have to experience the negative environmental effects, like the water will be cleaner, like just more diversity. And then the corporations, on the other hand, they would be effective in a negative way. Like this is something they don't want to change because they are doing it in the cheapest, fastest possible way to maximize their profits. But if we make it so that it's safer for us, like it's going to involve more time and money just for them making sure that their products are like up to standards. And it also, by breaking up these food monopolies, like there was this one statistic, it's not completely accurate, but it was something about like the 5 top beef producers control 80% of the market.
And they were looking to control 100%.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So by like breaking up these monopolies, obviously these companies would have to downsize, and that would lower their stock prices, their profits. And people in positions of power are greedy, and they don't want to give up the money that they have. So some of the potential barriers would be, well, the largest barrier would be overcoming the superior lobbying and networking that food corporations have with the government. According to Food Dive, these corporations give close to $40 million yearly to representatives in Congress for them to pass legislation that allow for these corporations to continue their practices. Like they have such a tight grip on Congress. Like these legislators are basically making laws that benefit these monopolies at this point, like making it harder to disintegrate them and so forth. And it also makes it more difficult to pass laws that would prohibit these practices because like the politicians are getting money from the corporations. Like if they are being funded by these corporations, why would they pass laws that actively go against that? So one of the example of the social change model in the film was the individual with the son. There was a scene where she went to DC to Congress to speak to one of the representatives of Colorado, and she was an advocate for the cause 6 years prior when her son got E. coli from contaminated meat. And then he passed away 12 days later. Like there was nothing they could do. And it was just like she went into this like really deep story, and it was really heartbreaking to watch. And then one of the group examples was be the unionization of food workers for better conditions and wages, which if the workers have more rights, then that in turn will make sure that, you know, even the conditions of the plants are better. And if the conditions of the plants are better, the food will consequently be better as well. And then the final one, the community one, it would be the polyface farms, which is created to produce sustainable, safe food products for their local community, which to me demonstrates leadership. By putting in the work, they're creating a better environment and better quality food and safer food for those in their local communities. And then this is just like our last page of references. Thank you.